Hello and welcome to the next segment of the video. In this video, we'd like to go through some advertising campaign metrics, which is the calculation of how do we actually find out whether the reach, the percentage of reach, impression, the GRP or gross rating point. We'll take a look at this. So in here, they are basically all these are the advertisement. Let's say there are 10 insertion of the advertisement. And here you go, let's say in a population, although this is very unrealistic, but you always start with the very unrealistic example. So at least to get to understand the terms or the matrix a little bit better. So in this case, that you only have 5 individuals in a population. So this individual A, B, C, D, E makes up the population. And you will have people who, whether they view or not even view actually, this is an opportunity to see. So whether 1 stands for opportunity to see and 0 means that obviously they don't have the opportunity to see it. Now, we are asked to calculate this campaign. So in terms of reach, in terms of percentages, in terms of impressions, in terms of average frequency, and the GRP or the gross rating points. How do we actually calculate that? Well, reach, it's basically the number of people who have viewed your advertisement at least once. So in that case, individual A will be considered as 1 reach, although this guy has watched it for 10 times, but it's still considered as 1 because if you recall what we have learned in terms of the definition of reach, it's the person who have watched at least once. So this person is counted as the person who have at least once. So does individual B, so does individual D and E. However, individual C will not be counted because they just have watched 0. So in this case, it will be 4 because there are 4 individuals who have at least watched that once. And in reach in percentage, it will be 4 divided by the total population, that's 5. So this giving me 80% of reach. Now, impressions. So impression is basically your exposure. So I just want to check on how much exposure is there. Well, if you look here, individual A has been exposed for all of that. So you can see that there are 10 insertion and individual A has watched it. So that's why the total here is 10. Individual B has watched it 5 times or opportunity 5 times. Individual D 5 and individual E 2. So the impressions is basically the exposure, and the exposure is basically the total of all of these combined. So in that case, this will be 10 plus 5 plus 0 plus 5 plus 2. So this will give me 22. So that's what my number of impression is. Next is the average frequency. Now, if you remember what is actually the formula for impression a while back. So impression is basically reach times average frequency. Okay, so we're just gonna write that down. So impression is basically equals to reach times average frequency. So we know that the reach is actually 4 and we know that impression, which is our exposure, is 22. So we know that the average frequency can be calculated by the impression divided by reach. So in this case, I know that this is going to be 22 divided by 4. That will give me 5.5. Okay, so that's all for average frequency. Now I'm just going to draw a line here so that at least you don't get confused. Okay, Now, last, which is the gross rating point. There are a number of ways to calculate this, but if we just stick to our original formula, which is the first one, so let me just go back. So GRP is basically 100 times impression divided by population size. So I'm just going to write that down. 100 times the impression divided by population size. So in this case, they are 100 times the impression, which is 22, divided by population size. That's 5. So this will give me 440 points. Or, so you can see that in here as well, they said that the GRP can be calculated by reach in terms of percentage times average frequency. So you can find out the percentage of reach times average frequency. So this is going to give me, my reach in percentage is 80% times by the average frequency, which is 5.5. This will also gonna give me 440. Okay, sorry for that, but basically this is going to be the same number as this one. Right, so I hope that makes sense. That also introduce you to the formula. That will also introduce you to matrix, this campaign matrix here. All right, so in here, there's also another way to calculate the GRP or gross rating points by insertion. So we can here see that there are 10 insertions as we know, and we are going to break this down into insertions. So we're going to first focus on the first insertion. So in the first insertion, there are 3 people that have opportunity to see this ad. So because of that, there are 3 impressions, and the rating point of that will be simply just 100 times 3 divided by 5. So this is going to give me 60. So that's how 60 is right here. The same thing here as well, 3 impression. You do the same calculation, you'll get 60. There are 3 impression in here, so 60. So that's 4 and 5, you'll get 60. Now in 5 here, sorry, in insertion number 6 here, you'll have 2 impression. So if you look at 2 impression, you have 100 times 2 divided by 5. That gives me 40. So 2 impressions will give me 40. And if it is 1 impression, then will give me 20 because of the same calculation. So if you do all the insertion, and if you add up these rating points, that actually also sum up to 440, which is our previous calculation for the gross rating points. So in here, you can see that the answer is actually the same. So what we can say from here is that the GRP, or the gross rating points, is the sum of the rating point of all the insertions that is in the advertisement. So in here, we can see that the sum in here will come out to 440. Now, obviously, as your media planners, you'd like to understand your advertisement a little bit better if you have high reach and also high frequency. Because high reach means that you manage to get more people, but at the same time, these people actually watch a couple of times. But as you know, high reach and high frequency are costly, as we probably see in our previous Facebook marketplace. So if your advertisement is just a bit, if your budget is just a bit, then obviously the number of reach will be very limited as compared as if you pump more money in. That makes sense. But media planners often need to trade off between reach and frequency. So do you want to get more reach but less frequency, or you want to actually get more frequency but less reach? So it depends on where you are at and in which stages that your product needs to be. So if you are in introduction, you probably want to get more people to watch, so at least people understand. You might forego the lesser frequency, or some people who just want to remind might need to actually have the low reach, high frequency kind of thing. So which one is better? I'd say none of that might work a little bit better, because the best will be having a high reach and high frequency. So it depends on what the product is and what you actually need. So previously we have just talked about the normal advertising campaign, but as we know, some of the advertising is just lost because the fact that it was not targeted to appropriate market. Like for example, if I watch advertisement on lipstick or makeup, well, it's fun, right? But I got no idea of any knowledge about lipsticks or foundations or something like that. So, well, I watched it, but is that actually necessary for me? Not really. So what I will do, I'll just discard it out of my mind. The same thing here as well. For example, if you saw an advertisement in JB Hi-Fi, well, it might attract some of the people who are in technology or who are into technology. But again, for those people who are care less about technology, then they don't really care about what is this all about. So they watched it, they have opportunity to see, but at the same time, they don't make use of that advertisement. So because of that, not only we understand the ad campaign matrix, but we also need to understand the target audience. So whether from the advertisement you will actually get into your target market. So in this case, what we called is that most advertisements are intended for selective potential buyers, or this is what we call a target audience. So because of that, this is what we call TARP. Okay. So targeted audience rating point, or sometimes it's called TRP in your textbook. So it denotes the target audience rating points. So it's just a specific segment of audience that is used for the calculation. So we only calculate those individuals who are part of the target group. Let me show you an example. So in here, they said that individual A to C represents the target audience. So you can see that there are 5 people in here, but actually your target audience, or those people who are actually going to buy your product, are from these particular segments. So their target, their individual A, individual B, and individual C. So we need to calculate campaign in terms of reach and impression and all of these things. So since we are only focusing on individual A and B and C, so we actually do not really care about individual D and individual C. So in this case, my reach will then be equals to 2. Not 5, but 2. Why? Because individual D and E are not part of our target group. Now because of that, my reach percentage is basically 2 out of 3. Because my target, there are only 3 people. So these 3 individuals are my population. And impression? Well, impression is again is the sum of the exposure. So in this case is individual A has watched it 10 times, individual B has watched it 5 times, individual C has neither watched it. Because of that, that will be 10 plus 5 plus 0. That will give me 15. Now the average frequency, as we probably learned from before, it's just basically the number of impression divided by the number of reach. So there are 15 impressions here divided by 2, which is the number of reach. So this will give me 7.5. Lastly, for targeted audience rating points, so this is going to be 100 times the number of the impressions, which is 15, divided by the total populations in here, which is 3. So this will give me 500 points. So you can also calculate your TARP or the targeted audience rating points through this method as well. So which is to calculate the insertions. So in this case, again, we are not going to care about individual D and individual E. So now we are only going to focus on these people, A, B, and C. So because of that, there are 2, but the rating point of that will be 100 times 2 over 3. That will give me 66.7%. And you'll do that for all the insertions that you have with this method. And the sum of these rating points will then give me 500, which is the same thing as we calculated right here. That will be my TARP. So this is TARP. Okay. So again, the same thing as the GRP or the gross rating point. The TARP is the sum of all the targeted insertions. So insertion number 1, we look at ABC. Insertion number 2, we look also at ABC, and so on. So that's pretty much how would you calculate your target audience matrix. In the next video, we will look at the net reach and also the frequency rating. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.